Hi, I'm Somer Hackley,
And I am Zen Mac, and this is the Art of Search Hiring Manager Series.
and these are stories and insights about all things hiring. Well, Zen, good to see you again. Thanks for
Hello,
being here.
Summer!
Hello.
Yes, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm even more thrilled to introduce you to a very, very good friend of mine, Vince Tseng, who is the current CEO of a company called Partnerslate, an industry veteran when it comes to startups and actually fast-growing companies in terms of hiring and scale. He and I worked together when he ran all of services at Square Trade many moons ago, actually. We hired some amazing folks there. He's seen this hyperscale before. I thought he'd be fantastic to bring here and share some insights with our listeners. Just the strong commitment to hiring top talent, passionate about startup growth. I mean, I'm just glad he's here. Hi, Vince.
Hi, Zen. Hi, Summer. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. No, I've heard so many great things about you. So we are thrilled you're here. So let's dive in. So, okay, Zen was chatting about how much experience you have at startups. So, what does top talent at startups specifically mean to you?
Yeah, well, that's a very broad question.
Yeah.
Startups can be different phases. And just by way of background, as Zen mentioned, at SquareTrade, where we knew each other from, over the course of the 2 decades that I was there, I hired probably 40 different directors and VP level hires. And when I left, I probably had close to 1,000 people, an organization of about 1,000 people reporting up into me. Um, and at my new startup, Partnerslate, we have about a dozen people. And when it comes to the question of top talent, it's there. There are a number of different categories of hires that one needs to make. You have specialists like software engineers and designers. And then you also have business operators. And I think of business operators as the general category of people who are doing business development, who are doing strategy, who are doing operations, who are just coming in and figuring stuff out and acting as mini GMs for their business lines. I'll focus this answer primarily on the non-specialists, so the generalists. And for generalists, really there are there's always going to be people who are able to thrive in a startup environment more than others. And so you really want that resilience because obviously going out and hiring takes a lot of time and energy and bandwidth. And as a startup founder, you have you have that the clock is always ticking for you to get things done, get things proven. And if you have a cycle of people who come in and are not the right fits, that can be a make or break issue for your organization. So from the standpoint of top talent, you really want people who can contribute to the sort of like nimble, fast-paced environment of a startup where priorities may change on a dime based on feedback from customers or feedback from the market, feedback from investors. Resilience is one of the key attributes that I really look for when I think about top talent. Now, if you are a startup founder out there, chances are you are an inspiring leader. You're somebody who has a good vision, and you have something of an ability to sell. You have an infectious enthusiasm, and you can probably recruit pretty great people out there. That's not always true for everybody that you hire in. You may hire in people who are great operators and be really good at their jobs, but not great at selling a vision. So, as many people say, you're as a founder, your responsibility is first and foremost to build your organization and to build a great team. Um, and so, when we think about top talent, if you're able to recruit somebody who is high performing or a team that's high performing, one of the big challenges is for most startups, you are not always lucky, and you don't go on a hockey stick like curve right off the bat. And it takes a long time, or it takes a reasonable amount of time to sort out what are the good ideas from what are the bad ideas, as you're getting towards product market fit, and as you are getting towards a scalable business that you can kind of say, this is the framework for our business, and this is what we need to repeat to grow it. And so it's really in that initial period that I think one of the challenges with top talent is that top talent generalists generally have are the most resources available to them. They are people who have lots of opportunities, so that if they weren't working for you, they could find many other opportunities to work. So the question becomes, well, if you combine that attribute set for your top talent with the fact that in the early days things may kind of hit a trough in where the company is headed or perceived to be headed. How do you make sure that you maintain those people and keep them motivated, energized, and excited about staying with your company instead of departing and therefore causing you to have to begin your search all over again?
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you started that out with resilience. So that's a good way to think about it. So, okay, as a follow-up question then, there's a lot of attributes you're looking for. So how do you do that? What are you asking perhaps during an interview process? What are you looking for in these candidates to make sure that they do embody all those qualities that you're looking for?
Yeah, yeah. So if your top talent has had prior experience at a startup, I think it's very informative to just have them tell you some stories about when times were bad at the startup. And you're not looking for what they did right or wrong. What you're really trying to understand is their psychology. At what point are they, somebody who is looking to kind of cut their losses and go for greener pastures, if you will. And as a top talent or rock star employee, you really want them to be on the side of stubborn and tenacious, almost to a fault, because it's easier to correct as their manager, and to for that attribute. You can, if they're stubbornly working at something that's not working, and you need them to give up on it, it's easier to persuade them of that than it is to do the reverse. So if you have somebody who is more, and I don't want to call it risk adverse, but somebody who is more likely to kind of identify losses and to kind of say, okay, well, this seems like a good time to pack up and try something else. It's very hard to instill doggedness in those employees. So it's you want to think about who you can correct for, and who you can't. And so I always look for people who have that kind of loyal doggedness, and so it's a challenge because most of your in many cases your top talent that you're recruiting may not have had that kind of experience before, and so you can't ask them about it directly, and so you have to ask them sort of analogous questions. So ask them to tell you about a time in their life when they faced real uncertainty about you know sticking in a city or moving, or how do they think about new opportunities and or following their passions, and really just again try to get at the psychology of what motivates them, and not whether they ended up staying or leaving, but just what motivates them.
Yeah, I love how you were saying how it's not just about past experience, right? Like you can look past that. And if you have the right questions and you have that kind of curiosity and you can ask about their decision making at certain points in life, maybe it's not even about a work situation. You can just get into their psyche. And I absolutely love your thought process on that. So you're looking for, let's say, quote, rock stars, right? So how do you balance that need for this talent, knowing that also things are going to be chaotic and poorly structured and ambiguous? There's anything else you would add along those lines?
Yeah, I think again, it's very telling what people's backgrounds are in
Hmm.
terms of their ability to the times that they've had to deal with adversity. So that's always where I start, is just help tell me about adversity that you've dealt with in your life. You want to get like a baseline understanding of what their level of grit is. Have they been handed things on a silver platter, or did they have to sort of earn it themselves? And so that's my starting point. I also think it is just very valuable to go and just start your search with the expectation that people are able to thrive in chaos. I think you will have people self-select out if you kind of hint that things are on the chaotic side, because for people who have, again, not gone through the startup experience, they expect chaos, but they don't really know what that means. And it's really the uncertainty and not knowing what actually works and what doesn't, and kind of, like just you're facing, you know, brand new territory. It's like going to a foreign country where you don't know anything about the culture and you don't know the language. Everything is kind of bewildering, and it could be that the simplest action in interaction is perfectly normal and custom, and you're trying to figure out, is this normal, or am I in danger? And that is the same sort of experience that I think people who have not had the startup life often come into when they see that chaos and ambiguity. And so if you don't set that expectation up front, you will have people who have this sort of like fantasyland, idea of startups in their head.
Mm.
And so you want to have those people self-select out, because even the people who say that they are, willing to embrace, that sort of chaos at the startup level, may not fully know what it means, and chances are your startup is going to be more chaotic than what's in their head.
I love how
Love
Zen's
that.
laughing. Yeah. No, I was just gonna say I love that. I love, and it's a balance of how do you assess someone, ask them the questions while you're also selling, but then also being so honest that they will self-select out. So there's a delicate balance of the conversation to make sure you do all the things and doing it at the right time. And but I love that because you don't want them to show up and be surprised later. So I
Right.
love that concept of like, no, 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 this is what it really is. And if it's not for you, that's okay.
Right. Right.
And yeah, there's
And it's important to remember that, as an early stage startup, you don't want in most circumstances, there are always exceptions. In most circumstances, you don't want a team that is all rock stars.
mm-hmm.
You need one or two rock stars that can help you execute on the most important things, that can think independently. But for the most part, your team needs to be reliable people who can execute, who can deal with change and adversity, but are not there because to be you, because you are the founder, and you're the one who has to create a vision for everybody else to follow. And if you have too many cooks in the kitchen, as they say, that can become a distraction, and it can create noise and reduce the clarity of a vision. And whether or not you have the right vision, you have to have confidence in yourself as a founder that when you don't have the right vision, you pivot until you find the one that does. And if you have one or two contrasting ideas, that can be very helpful. But more than that, and you start to run into problems, and that will create conflict for everybody involved.
I was just gonna say, I really like what you said about going beyond the job itself, but like, what's the grit? What's the resilience? What's the steady hand, so to speak, when you come into a chaotic startup environment? And I think that's a little bit underutilized as an interview uh, skill for most startups that I've seen. I think we are really, really concerned about, can the person do the job, but in reality, they can, but do they have that kind of mental preparation for the ambiguity in the startup space? And I think you really highlighted that. So thank you.
Yeah, that's right. And, again, for engineers, they have their job, they have to write code. But if you are hiring somebody to do some sales operation, there is a greater than 75% chance that what they're doing in 3 or 6 months' time is a 90-degree turn from what you hired them to do. So that is the most important thing, that they are able to, you know, pivot and do that, decently well. That's more important than them being, the perfect fit for that initial sales operation role.
I love that. I think that's a good way to sum it all up. Well, Vince, it was so great to see you here today. Thank you for joining us. There's so many takeaways our listeners will get from this. So we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Summer. Thanks, Zen.
All right, thanks.